He stood barefoot on the shore of a silent island, the wind brushing past his face like a whisper from the void. No armor, no war cry, just a carved wooden oar resting on his shoulder, and eyes that stared through time itself. His opponent raged, pacing, boiling with fury. But Musashi? He was already winning, not with strength, not with speed, but with a silence so still it made the air around him feel heavier, as if time was waiting for him. This wasn't a duel. It was a dissection of the human mind. Musashi understood something most warriors never did. You don't win when you strike. You win when your opponent breaks themselves before the blade ever moves, while others prepared for war with noise, shouting, ritual, fury. Musashi prepared with absence. No attachment, no expectation, just presence. Cold, clear, lethal presence. At 13 years old, he fought his first duel, with a wooden stick. His opponent was a grown samurai, armored, trained, confident. Musashi didn't arrive on time. He didn't apologize. He didn't even speak. And still, he won. Why? Because silence disturbs the noisy mind. It forces the opponent to look inward, and most are terrified of what they find there. This was Musashi's real mastery. Not just the sword, but the silence that preceded it. Musashi didn't crave the clash of metal. He didn't fight for glory. He fought as a mirror, calm, unreadable, untouchable. If you make your opponent flinch, he said, you have already won. His silence was a psychological blade. It sliced into his enemies long before his hands moved, because in the stillness he saw everything. Tension in their shoulders, doubt in their stance, ego in their breath. And Musashi? He was empty, not hollow, but clear. There was no panic to rush, no pride to defend, no fear to hide. He simply watched, and struck only when the moment was beyond question. We've been taught to react, to defend, to prove. But Musashi learned something far more dangerous. The one who is silent, sees first, understands deepest, and moves last, with precision. He didn't conquer enemies. He let them destroy themselves. All he had to do was remain still. That's how silence, in the hands of a master, becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. He didn't arrive with fire in his eyes. He came late, barefoot, with a wooden sword carved from a boat's oar. The crowd whispered. His opponent waited, blade drawn, seething, rattled. But Musashi didn't run. He didn't bow. He simply stood there, as if he was already the aftermath. The duel was supposed to be a contest of skill. Instead, it became a lesson in how time, tension, and silence can be manipulated like weapons. Musashi didn't just outfight people. He unmade them. Every move he made was a thread in a psychological web. He was never early, because early meant nervous. He was never loud, because noise meant doubt. He was never rushed, because rushing meant fear. And fear was a scent he never wore, but always followed in others. The unseen. Duel before the blades ever met, Musashi had already entered the battlefield. But that battlefield wasn't the arena. It wasn't the space between him and his enemy. It was the space within them. Every second he made them wait, their minds twisted, their breath shortened, their confidence cracked. He knew the longer they waited in silence, the louder their thoughts became. Doubts, memories, fear, anger, all of it swirled while he stood perfectly still. Because silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of control. Musashi weaponized stillness like a tactician uses terrain. What most never see. People think confrontation is about aggression, but Musashi knew that raw force burns fast and wild. It consumes the user as quickly as it breaks the opponent. He wasn't there to burn. He was there to bend the moment to his will. Every breath he took, slow and grounded, was a signal, a message. I am not reacting to you. You are reacting to me. And once his enemy became reactive, they were no longer fighting with discipline. They were fighting with emotion. That's when Musashi won. Do nothing which is of no use, he wrote. And what's more useless than reacting in panic to someone who is still? The silent manipulator. His silence wasn't passive. It was surgical. He didn't just use it to stay calm. He used it to disrupt rhythms, disturb expectations, and dismantle timing. In doing so, he shattered his opponent's structure. They had trained for combat. They hadn't trained for a man who refused to play their game, and by the time they realized it, it was too late. Closing of Section 2, Musashi didn't fight chaos with chaos. He met rage with calm. He met noise with nothing. He made his silence louder than any scream, and in doing so, he taught a timeless lesson. The one who controls the rhythm controls the outcome. After his final duel, Musashi didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. He didn't even speak. He simply walked away, into the mountains. No crowds, no followers, no sound. Because for Musashi, victory was never the point. Freedom was. He spent the rest of his life in isolation, painting, writing, meditating. But make no mistake, he wasn't escaping the world. He was watching it more clearly than anyone ever had. His silence wasn't just a weapon in battle. It was a way of seeing, a way of choosing, a way of being untouchable in a world that demanded constant noise. No one to impress, nothing to prove. Musashi had no master, no allegiance, no ambition to rise in ranks or gain noble titles. He rejected comfort. He slept under the stars. He wore simple clothes and carried 2 swords, not to show strength, but because he needed nothing else. Why? Because every attachment is a chain. Every desire is a distraction, and every identity, warrior, hero, legend, is just another mask. Musashi tore off the mask. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world, he wrote. To live like that, without ego, without noise, is not weakness. It's the most dangerous kind of freedom. Listening to what others miss while others filled their days with status, arguments, and approval-seeking. Musashi watched. He walked into forests and stared at trees until they taught him things no teacher ever could. He painted with the same clarity he fought with, each stroke silent, each image wordless, but loud in meaning. He wrote the Book of 5 Rings, not as a boast, but as a gift, a guide not for killing, but for understanding. Understanding the self, the enemy, the flow of time, the illusion of control. Musashi realized that the greatest battles were never fought on islands or blood-stained fields. They were fought in the space between thoughts, where silence reveals what noise tries to hide. Silence as a mirror. He didn't become silent because he feared the world. He became silent because he saw through it. He knew that the loudest voices are often the weakest, that arrogance is camouflage for insecurity, that certainty is often a mask for fear. Musashi's silence wasn't retreat. It was resistance against a world trying to shape him, label him, own him, and the more he said nothing, the more he became everything people couldn't understand and couldn't defeat. Closing of Section 3, Musashi didn't just survive, he transcended. He walked a path no one else could see, because he wasn't following sound. He was following something deeper, a quiet so complete, it echoed. At the end of his life, Musashi didn't die with a sword in his hand. He didn't die in battle, nor in fury, nor in fame. He died sitting upright in a cave, legs folded, spine straight, eyes still. He died the same way he lived, with Psyche. complete control. That cave was called Rei Gando, the Spirit Rock Cave. There, away from the world, he wrote his final words. Not a story, not a boast, but a list, a simple scroll, called Dokodo, the way of walking alone. 21. Rules, quiet, stark, empty of decoration, but within them was the full gravity of a man who never flinched. He left. No questions. He didn't say, "Remember me." He didn't ask to be honored. He didn't demand legacy. What he left behind wasn't an empire. It was a path, narrow, dangerous, and free. He wrote things like, "Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." These weren't just thoughts, they were scars. Each one carved from the silence between wars, the stillness after kills, the years of isolation. He bled these ideas quietly, through experience, not ideology. Musashi had seen everything: death, honor, rage, pride. And at the end of all of it, stillness, observation, letting go. The final duel was never against a man all those years, all those battles. They weren't about defeating others. They were rehearsals, preparations for one final confrontation, the fight with the self, the ego that wants to prove, the fear that clings, the pride that speaks too much too fast. Musashi's greatest victory wasn't over swordsmen. It was over everything in him that wanted to be seen, applauded, remembered. He killed it. Silently, and in its place, he sat. Alone, unmoved, and died on his terms. No drama, no audience, just breath, and then no breath. Silence, the final teacher. Most people die screaming, or begging, or lost in thoughts of things undone. Musashi died clear. Because silence wasn't something he learned. It was something he became, and when he faced death, he faced it with the same calm he brought to every duel. He didn't ask why. He didn't delay. He didn't cry out. He accepted the moment with open hands because he had already practiced death 1,000 times. Every time he killed fear. Every time he let go of control. Every time he walked away from comfort into the void. He had trained not just for victory, but for disappearance. The message we keep missing today: Musashi is remembered as the greatest swordsman to ever live. But that's not what made him great. It wasn't the 50 undefeated duels. It wasn't the twin swords. It wasn't even the Book of 5 Rings. It was the fact that he could walk away from all of it. He didn't cling to his legend. He didn't trap himself in glory. He understood something the world still refuses to see. A man who needs nothing can never be broken. Musashi became that man. Through silence, through suffering, through solitude. What are we afraid to face? We talk too much. We react too quickly. We rush into conflict, into attention, into noise, because we're terrified of being alone with ourselves. But Musashi's silence holds a mirror up to that fear. He invites us to stop posturing, to stop chasing, to stop pretending we're in control, and instead, to stand still, to breathe, to observe, and to realize that the war isn't out there. It never was. The real war is within, between your stillness and your screaming. Musashi mastered that space, and in doing so, he became untouchable. Not a warrior, a mirror. Musashi's life isn't a template for violence. It's not about killing others. It's about refusing to let the world kill your clarity. He didn't fight to win. He fought to see what remained of himself after everything was stripped away, and in the end, only silence remained. But not the silence of emptiness, the silence of knowing, of seeing all things clearly, and needing none of them. Final reflection. Musashi didn't conquer the world. He conquered the self the world kept trying to build in him, the prideful self, the noisy self, the desperate self, and he did it with stillness. Not by shouting, but by listening. Not by chasing power, but by letting go. Not by becoming someone, but by being no one. And that was his final undefeated duel. Final call to action, CTA. Sit with your silence long enough, and you'll hear what victory truly sounds like.